On a cloudless afternoon, the asphalt glows like incandescent metal as a German shepherd walks into the center of an empty street, suffocated by the heat. Its paws begin to stick to the surface, preventing any movement. From a window, an elderly lady watches in silence, paralyzed by the heat and helplessness. Inside a nearby house, a baby crawls toward the open door, ignoring the shouts in the background. It crosses the hot sidewalk without stopping, without hesitation. When it reaches the dog, it quietly extends its little hand, and for a second, everything stopped. The sun had turned merciless over Phoenix that Tuesday morning, casting the entire city into what felt like a giant oven. The weather forecast had been warning residents for days about the approaching heat wave, with temperatures expected to soar above 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Even the local news anchors seemed genuinely concerned as they urged people to stay indoors and keep their pets safe. Sarah Mitchell stood in her air-conditioned kitchen, watching the morning news while her 18-month-old son Tommy played. With his colorful blocks on the cool tile floor, the reporter's voice carried an unusual urgency as she described the unprecedented heat wave moving across Arizona. Sarah absently stirred her coffee, grateful for the modern comforts that would keep her family safe from the brutal temperatures outside. The subdivision where Sarah lived was typical of Phoenix's newer developments. Rows of cream-colored stucco, houses lined the streets, each with their own small front yards featuring drought-resistant landscaping. Desert willows and Palo Verde trees provided what little shade they could, but even these hardy desert natives seemed to wilt under the approaching heat. By 10 in the morning, the temperature had already climbed past 100 degrees. The asphalt streets began to shimmer with heat waves, creating an almost liquid appearance that distorted everything in the distance. Most residents had retreated indoors, cranking up their air conditioning units and postponing any outdoor activities until the evening hours, if at all. It was during this oppressive morning that Sarah first noticed something unusual outside. Her living room window. A large German shepherd was lying in the middle of Maple Street, directly in front of the Henderson house across the way. At first glance, she assumed the dog was simply resting, perhaps waiting for its owner to return from an errand. But as minutes passed and the sun climbed higher, Sarah began to feel a growing sense of unease. The dog wasn't moving, not even to seek shade under one of the nearby cars or trees. Its thick coat, beautiful and luxurious in cooler weather, now seemed like a cruel burden in the desert heat. Sarah squinted through her window, trying to get a better look. The animal's sides were rising and falling rapidly, and even from her air-conditioned vantage point, she could sense something was terribly wrong. Tommy continued playing at her feet, occasionally babbling in his adorable toddler language and holding up blocks for her approval. "Look, Mama, look," he would say, his bright blue eyes sparkling with innocent joy. Sarah smiled down at him, but her attention kept drifting back to the window and the motionless dog outside. As the morning progressed, the situation became increasingly alarming. The German shepherd attempted to stand several times, but each effort seemed more labored than the last. Its paws appeared to be stuck to the scorching asphalt, and Sarah realized with horror that the dog might actually be suffering from severe heat-related distress. The animal's tongue was hanging out, and it was panting so heavily that Sarah could almost feel its desperation through the glass. She grabbed her phone and quickly dialed her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived next door and had always been involved in community affairs. "Maria, are you seeing what's happening outside? There's a German shepherd in the street, and I think it's in serious trouble." Maria Rodriguez had indeed noticed the dog. A retired teacher in her 60s, she had been keeping watch from her bedroom window for the past hour. "I've been worried, sick about it, Sarah. I called animal control 20 minutes ago, but they said they're overwhelmed with heat-related emergencies today. They might not get here for several hours." Several hours. Sarah felt her stomach clench as she realized what that might mean for the suffering animal. She looked down at Tommy, who was now trying to stack his blocks into an elaborate tower, completely oblivious to the drama unfolding outside their home. "We can't just wait," Sarah said into the phone, her voice filled with determination. "That poor animal could be seriously injured by then." "I know, dear, but what can we do? It's already 110 degrees out there, and the asphalt must be even hotter. I tried to step outside a few minutes ago just to check my mailbox, and the heat hit me like a wall. I had to come right back in." Sarah hung up the phone and continued watching the dog. Other neighbors had begun to notice the situation as well. She could see curtains moving in windows up and down the street as residents peered out at the unfolding crisis. The German Shepherd made another attempt to stand, and this time Sarah could see that its paws were indeed adhered to the melted asphalt. The sight made her feel physically sick. Her phone rang again. This time it was Janet Williams from 3 houses down. "Sarah, are you seeing this? My husband Bob wants to go help, but I'm terrified he'll collapse from heat stroke. He's already had 1 heart episode this year." More calls followed. The entire neighborhood seemed to be watching and worrying, but no one knew how to safely intervene. Someone suggested using a hose to cool down the area around the dog, but the nearest outdoor spigot was on the Henderson property, and no one was sure if the family was even home. Another neighbor proposed calling the fire department, but emergency services were already stretched thin, dealing with heat-related calls across the city. As Sarah continued to monitor the situation, she noticed Tommy had grown unusually quiet. He had abandoned his blocks and was now standing at the sliding glass door that led to their backyard, pressing his small hands against the warm glass. His curious eyes were fixed on something outside, though Sarah couldn't tell exactly what had captured his attention. "What do you see, sweetie?" she asked, kneeling down beside him. Tommy pointed enthusiastically toward the front of the house, though the glass door faced their backyard. "Doggy, doggy," he said excitedly, somehow sensing the presence of the animal despite not being able to see it from this angle. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Tommy had always had an unusual connection with animals. Even as a baby, he would calm down instantly whenever their neighbor's cat appeared in their yard, and he had never shown fear around any of the dogs they encountered during their walks. Around the neighborhood, the temperature outside continued to climb relentlessly. By 11:30, Sarah's outdoor thermometer read 113 degrees, and the weather app on her phone was predicting the day's high would reach 118. She had never experienced heat this intense, even after living in Phoenix for 5 years. The very air seemed to shimmer with dangerous energy. The German Shepherd's condition was deteriorating visibly. Its attempts to move had become weaker and less frequent. Sarah could see that several neighbors had gathered in their doorways and on their covered porches, maintaining a safe distance, but clearly sharing her concern. Everyone wanted to help, but the risk of heat exhaustion for any human who ventured onto that superheated asphalt was very real. It was then that Sarah noticed Tommy had somehow managed to unlatch the baby gate that usually kept him away from the front door. In her distraction with the crisis outside, she had failed to notice his determined efforts to reach the front of the house. By the time she realized what was happening, Tommy was already standing at the front door, his small hand reaching up toward the doorknob with surprising determination for such a young child. Sarah rushed toward the front door, her heart pounding as she realized Tommy's intention. "No, sweetie, we can't go outside right now," she said gently but firmly, scooping him up in her arms. Tommy protested with a frustrated whimper, reaching his small arms toward the door and repeating, "Doggy, doggy," with increasing urgency. The phone rang again, interrupting the moment. It was Frank Henderson, the elderly man who lived directly across from where the German Shepherd was trapped. His voice was shaky with emotion. "Sarah, I feel terrible watching this happen right in front of my house. My wife Evelyn and I have been trying to figure out what to do. We don't recognize this dog. It's not from our immediate neighborhood. Has anyone checked to see if it has tags? Sarah asked, still holding a squirming Tommy who seemed determined to reach the door. That's the problem. None of us can get close enough to check. The heat radiating off that asphalt is like nothing I've experienced in 40 years of living in Arizona. My neighbor Jim tried to approach from the sidewalk with a long-handled pool net, thinking he could somehow hook the dog's collar, but he had to give up after just a few steps. Sarah could hear the frustration and helplessness in Frank's voice. She looked down at Tommy, who had temporarily stopped struggling and was now staring intently at the front door, as if he could see through it to the suffering animal beyond. The situation was becoming more desperate by the minute. Through her front window, Sarah could see that more neighbors had emerged onto their covered porches and in their doorways, creating an audience of concerned onlookers who felt powerless to act. Someone had managed to set up a shade umbrella on their porch and was pointing it toward the street, though it provided minimal relief at such a distance. Mrs. Peterson, from 2 houses down, had attempted to spray water from her garden hose, but the distance was too great, and most of the water evaporated before it could reach the dog. The few droplets that did make it seemed to create more steam than cooling relief. Frank, what about calling a professional animal rescue organization? Sarah suggested. Maybe they have equipment designed for extreme heat situations. We've tried that too. Desert Animal Rescue said their heat weather team is already responding to multiple emergencies across the valley. They're prioritizing cases based on severity, and they won't be able to reach us until late afternoon at the earliest. Late afternoon. Sarah glanced at the clock on her kitchen wall. It was only noon, and the temperature was still climbing. The dog would never survive until late afternoon in these conditions. Tommy had been unusually quiet during her phone conversation, but now he was tugging at her shirt and pointing toward the kitchen. "Mama, wah wah, wah wah," he said, using his word for water. Sarah followed his gaze and realized he was pointing toward the refrigerator where they kept his sippy cups. "You want water, sweetheart?" she asked, but Tommy shook his head vigorously and continued pointing while saying, "Doggy wah wah, doggy wah wah." The realization hit Sarah like a bolt of lightning. Tommy understood that the dog needed water. Despite being only 18 months old, he had somehow grasped the gravity of the situation and was trying to communicate a solution. She set Tommy down carefully and knelt to his level. "You want to give the doggy water?" she asked gently. Tommy nodded enthusiastically and ran to the refrigerator, trying to open the door that was far too heavy for his small hands. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from her neighbor across the street. It was a photo taken from Janet Williams's upstairs window, showing the German Shepherd from above. The image was heartbreaking. The dog's thick coat was matted with perspiration, and its body position suggested complete exhaustion. Even more concerning, there appeared to be blistering around its paw pads, where they met the asphalt. Another text came through, this one from Maria Rodriguez. "Sarah, I've been timing the dog's breathing. It's getting faster and more shallow. I'm genuinely worried we might lose this beautiful animal if something doesn't change soon." The word "lose" sent a chill down Sarah's spine, despite the oppressive heat. She looked at Tommy, who was now dragging one of his larger toys toward the front door, a small wagon he used for carrying his stuffed animals around the house. "Tommy, what are you doing, baby?" "A doggy ride," he announced proudly, patting the side of his little wagon. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Was her toddler actually developing a rescue plan? It seemed impossible, yet Tommy's actions were becoming increasingly purposeful and directed toward helping the trapped animal. The phone rang once more. This time it was a number Sarah didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Sarah Mitchell?" asked a woman's voice. "This is Dr. Jennifer Walsh from Desert Valley Animal Hospital. One of your neighbors gave me your number. I understand there's a German Shepherd in distress in your neighborhood." "Yes, Dr. Walsh, the situation is pretty serious. The dog appears to be stuck to the asphalt, and it's been out there for hours now." "I'm familiar with these types of heat emergencies. The dog's paws have likely bonded to the melted asphalt surface. This creates a terrible cycle. The dog can't move to seek shade, which means the situation continues to worsen. Do you have any large umbrellas or tarps that could provide immediate shade?" Sarah looked around her house and mentally inventoried their belongings. "We have a large beach umbrella in the garage, and I think there are some old blankets in our storage closet." That could help, but someone would need to get close enough to set up the shade, and in this heat, that's extremely dangerous for humans too. The asphalt temperature is probably close to 150 degrees right now. What about using some kind of protective gear? Even with protection, heat exhaustion can happen very quickly. Is there any way to approach from a shaded area or create a path of cooler surface? Sarah was about to respond when she noticed that Tommy had somehow managed to open the front door. The dead bolt was too high for him to reach, but the regular door handle was just within his determined grasp when he stretched on his tiptoes. A wave of furnace-like air swept into the house, causing both Sarah and Dr. Walsh to gasp. Sarah, from the immediate physical sensation, and Dr. Walsh, from hearing it through the phone. "Oh my goodness, Tommy, no!" Sarah exclaimed, dropping the phone and rushing toward her son. But Tommy was faster than she anticipated. With the confidence and fearlessness that only small children possess, he stepped out onto the covered front porch. The temperature difference was shocking. Even in the shade of the porch roof, the air felt like breathing inside an oven. "Doggy!" Tommy called out happily, as if he were greeting a friend at the playground rather than approaching a life-threatening situation. Sarah reached the doorway just as several neighbors began shouting warnings from their own porches. "Sarah, get him back inside," called Frank Henderson from across the street. "The heat will overwhelm him." But as Sarah stepped onto her own porch to retrieve Tommy, she was struck by something remarkable. Despite the oppressive temperature, Tommy seemed remarkably unaffected. His cheeks were rosy from the heat, but he wasn't showing the immediate distress that the adults were experiencing. He was walking with purpose toward the edge of the porch, his small hand trailing along the porch railing as if he was simply taking a leisurely stroll. "Tommy, come back to Mama," Sarah called, fighting against her own urge to retreat back into the air conditioning. But Tommy had spotted the German Shepherd and was now pointing excitedly in its direction. "Doggy hurt, doggy hurt," he announced to anyone who would listen, his voice carrying clearly across the quiet street. The entire neighborhood seemed to hold its collective breath as Tommy took his first step off the porch and onto the sidewalk. Sarah felt her maternal instincts warring with a growing realization that something extraordinary was happening. Her son moved with a purpose and confidence that defied his young age, as if he understood exactly what needed to be done. "Tommy, please wait," Sarah called out, but her voice lacked its usual authority. There was something about the way Tommy was moving, not the reckless wandering of a typical toddler, but the determined stride of someone on a mission. Dr. Walsh's voice crackled through the phone, which Sarah had somehow managed to keep hold of. "Sarah, are you still there? What's happening?" "My son. He's walking toward the dog," Sarah managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to get him back immediately. A child that age could suffer heat stroke in minutes under these conditions." But as Sarah watched, something remarkable began to unfold. Tommy's small feet protected only by his soft-soled sneakers, seemed to move across the hot concrete with surprising ease. Where adults had been forced to retreat within seconds, this 18-month-old child continued forward with steady, deliberate steps. Frank Henderson had emerged from his house, despite his age and the dangerous heat. "Sarah, I'm coming to help," he called out, but after just a few steps onto his own driveway, he was forced to retreat back under his covered entryway, breathing heavily. "Frank, don't," called his wife Evelyn from their doorway. "You'll make yourself sick." Other neighbors were shouting warnings and suggestions from their respective porches, creating a chorus of concerned voices that seemed to hang in the thick, still air. Someone suggested calling 911, but others pointed out that emergency services were already overwhelmed with heat-related calls. Tommy, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the commotion he was causing. His focus remained entirely on the German Shepherd, who had lifted its head at the sound of the approaching child. For the first time since the crisis began, the dog showed signs of alertness and interest. "Doggy," Tommy said softly as he reached the edge of the asphalt. The temperature radiating from the street surface was intense enough that Sarah could feel it from her position on the porch. But Tommy paused only briefly before stepping onto the scorching pavement. The collective gasp from the watching neighbors was audible. Several people shouted for him to stop, but Tommy either didn't hear them or chose not to respond. His small form created a surreal image against the shimmering heat waves rising from the asphalt, a tiny figure moving through what looked like a desert mirage. Dr. Walsh was trying to get Sarah's attention through the phone. "Sarah, please, tell me what's happening. I need to know if I should call emergency services." He's walking across the street," Sarah said in amazement. "Dr. Walsh, I know this sounds impossible, but he doesn't seem to be affected by the heat the way the rest of us are." "That's not possible. Children are actually more susceptible to heat exhaustion than adults." But the evidence was right in front of Sarah's eyes. Tommy was now halfway across the street, moving steadily toward the German Shepherd. His face showed concentration rather than distress, and his steps remained sure and purposeful. The German Shepherd, sensing the approaching presence, made an effort to lift its head higher. Its eyes, which had been glazed with exhaustion and pain, seemed to focus on the small figure walking toward it. For a moment, the dog's tail gave the faintest attempt at a wag. "It's okay, doggy," Tommy said in his sweet toddler voice as he drew closer. "Tommy, help." Sarah found herself moving forward as well, her maternal instincts overriding her fear of the heat. But as soon as she stepped off the porch and onto the sidewalk, the intensity of the temperature hit her like a physical blow. She managed only 3 steps before she had to retreat, gasping for cooler air. Maria Rodriguez appeared at her side, having crossed over from next door. "Sarah, we have to do something. We can't let him—" "But look at him, Maria," Sarah interrupted, pointing toward her son. "Look how he's moving. It's like the heat isn't affecting him at all." Indeed, Tommy had now reached the German Shepherd and was kneeling down beside the suffering animal. The sight should have been terrifying. A toddler in immediate danger from heat exposure, but instead there was something almost magical about the scene. Tommy extended his small hand toward the dog's muzzle, speaking in the gentle, soothing tones that children naturally use with animals. "Nice doggy. Tommy, here, no scared." The German Shepherd, despite its obvious distress, lifted its head enough to sniff Tommy's outstretched hand. The contact seemed to energize the animal, and it made its most successful attempt yet to shift its position. "He's actually helping," whispered Mrs. Peterson, who had joined the group of neighbors watching from Sarah's porch. "The dog is responding to him." Dr. Walsh's voice came through the phone speaker with increased urgency. "Sarah, I need you to try to understand what's happening. How long has the child been exposed to the direct heat? Sarah glanced at her watch. About 5 minutes now. 5 minutes. And he's not showing any signs of distress? None at all. In fact, he seems comfortable. Through the phone, Dr. Walsh could be heard conferring with someone in the background. When she returned to the call, her voice carried a note of professional curiosity mixed with concern. Sarah, I want you to know that I'm driving over there right now with some specialized equipment, but I need you to keep watching your son carefully. What you're describing is highly unusual. On the street, Tommy had managed to position himself so that his small body was creating a patch of shade for the German Shepherd's head. The dog's breathing seemed to slow slightly, and its eyes remained focused on the child's face. "Mama!" "Mom," Tommy called out suddenly, turning back toward the house. "Doggy thirsty, doggy needs wah-wah." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. Even in this extraordinary situation, Tommy was thinking about the dog's needs. He had somehow assessed the situation and determined that water was the priority. Frank Henderson, who had been watching from his covered porch, suddenly called out across the street. "Sarah, I have an idea. What if we create a relay system? Someone could throw a bottle of water to Tommy and he could help the dog drink." "That might work," Maria said excitedly. "Tommy, can you catch?" But before anyone could attempt this plan, something even more remarkable happened. Tommy placed both of his small hands on either side of the German Shepherd's head and began speaking to it in a soft, continuous stream of toddler babble mixed with recognizable words of comfort. The dog's eyes, which had been clouded with pain and exhaustion, seemed to clear. With visible effort, it managed to lift its front quarters slightly, reducing the contact between its body and the scorching asphalt. "My God," breathed Dr. Walsh through the phone speaker. "Sarah, are you seeing what I think you're describing?" "The dog is trying to stand," Sarah said in wonder. "Tommy is somehow giving it strength." Several neighbors had now gathered on Sarah's porch, creating an impromptu observation deck for this unprecedented scene. Everyone seemed to sense that they were witnessing something special, something that defied logical explanation. Tommy continued his gentle ministrations, running his small hands along the dog's neck and speaking in his soothing, childlike manner. The German Shepherd, responding to this unexpected source of comfort, managed to shift its weight enough to free one of its front paws from the adhesive grip of the melted asphalt. "Look!" shouted Janet Williams from down the street. "It's working! The dog is getting free." But just as hope began to surge through the gathered crowd, a new challenge presented itself. The sun, which had been partially obscured by a thin layer of clouds, broke through completely, sending the temperature soaring even higher. The additional heat created a visible wave of distortion rising from the asphalt, and even Tommy, who had seemed immune to the temperature thus far, paused in his efforts and looked back toward his mother with a slightly confused expression. The moment of uncertainty on Tommy's face sent a wave of panic through the assembled neighbors. For the first time since he had ventured onto the scorching asphalt, the toddler showed signs that the extreme heat might be affecting him. Sarah felt her heart lurch as she saw her son's confident demeanor waver slightly. "Tommy!" she called out, taking several steps forward before the wall of heat forced her back again. "Baby, can you hear Mama?" Tommy turned toward his mother's voice, and the slight confusion in his expression deepened Sarah's concern. But then he looked back at the German Shepherd, whose head had drooped back down to the asphalt, and his determination seemed to return. "Doggy's sick, Mama," he called. "Back. Tommy, help Doggy." Dr. Walsh's voice came through the phone with professional urgency. Sarah, I'm about 10 minutes away now. Can you describe exactly what you're seeing? Any changes in your son's behavior or the dog's condition? Tommy seems to be getting affected by the heat now, but he won't leave the dog. And the dog, it managed to free one paw, but it's looking worse again. Frank Henderson, who had been thinking frantically from his covered porch, suddenly shouted across the street, "Sarah, what if we wet down some towels and try to throw them to Tommy? He could use them to cool the dog." "That's actually not a bad idea," Dr. Walsh said through the phone. "Evaporative cooling could provide some relief, but the delivery method would be crucial." Maria Rodriguez was already in action. "I have some old bath towels that I don't mind losing. Let me soak them in cold water." As Maria hurried back to her house, other neighbors began contributing ideas and supplies. Mrs. Peterson emerged from her house carrying a large thermos filled with ice water. "For Tommy, when he needs it," she explained. Janet Williams jogged up the street carrying what looked like a small tent or tarp. "This is from my grandson's camping set. It's lightweight, and it might provide some shade if we can figure out how to get it over there." The sense of community mobilization was remarkable. People who normally only exchanged polite waves were now working together with the focused intensity of an emergency response team. Even Mr. Kowalski, the elderly man from the corner house who usually kept to himself, had emerged from his home carrying a long-handled pool skimmer. "Maybe we can use this to pass things to the boy," he offered in his gruff but kindly voice. Meanwhile, Tommy had resumed his gentle care of the German Shepherd. He had somehow managed to position himself to provide maximum shade for the animal's head and shoulders, and he was using his small hands to gently fan the dog's face. The sight was both heartwarming and terrifying. A tiny child caring for a suffering animal in conditions that would quickly overcome most adults. "Doggy, wake up," Tommy whispered, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Tommy here. No scared." The German Shepherd's eyes opened again, focusing on Tommy's face with what appeared to be gratitude. The dog attempted once more to shift its position, and this time it managed to free its second front paw. The movement was painful. Everyone watching could see the animal wince, but it represented progress. Maria returned with 3 soaking wet towels. "How do we get these to him safely?" Frank Henderson had been studying the distance and angles. "If we work together, we might be able to make a relay chain. The street isn't that wide, and if we time it right, we could get them close enough for Tommy to reach." "But who's going to be the final link in the chain?" asked Mrs. Peterson. "Someone would have to get within a few feet of him, and that's the most dangerous area." The question hung in the air as everyone considered the risks. The temperature had now reached what Sarah's phone app showed as 119 degrees, and the asphalt was likely well over 150 degrees. Even brief exposure at that level could cause serious burns or heat stroke. It was then that an unexpected voice joined the conversation. "I'll do it." Everyone turned to see a young man in his early 20s jogging up the street. Sarah recognized him as Jake Morrison, a college student who lived with his parents 3 houses down. She had seen him around the neighborhood, but had never really spoken with him. "Jake, you can't," protested his mother, Linda Morrison, who had just arrived behind him. "The heat will overwhelm you in seconds." "Mom, I'm young and in good shape, and that kid is out there risking everything to help an animal. I can't just stand here and watch." Dr. Walsh, who had been listening to the conversation through the phone, interjected. "If someone is going to attempt this, they need to take precautions. Wet clothing, a hat, and they need to move fast. No heroics. Get in, deliver what's needed, and get out immediately." Jake was already pulling off his t-shirt and asking Maria to soak it thoroughly. "What exactly am I delivering?" The wet towels for the dog, and this thermos of ice water for Tommy, Mrs. Peterson explained. And this spray bottle, added Janet Williams, producing a large garden sprayer. I filled it with cold water. You could spray both the boy and the dog to cool them down. As Jake prepared for his mission, Tommy seemed to sense that help was coming. He looked up from his patient care of the German Shepherd and waved enthusiastically at the gathered adults. Hi, hi, he called out cheerfully, as if he were greeting neighbors at a backyard barbecue rather than managing a life-threatening emergency. The dog, encouraged by Tommy's continued presence, made another attempt to rise. This time, it managed to get its front legs partially under its body, lifting its chest slightly off the scorching asphalt. The effort was clearly exhausting, but it represented the most significant progress since the crisis began. Look at that, breathed Frank Henderson. The dog is actually trying to stand. Dr. Walsh's voice came through the phone with excitement. That's excellent news. If we can get the dog fully upright and mobile, we can guide it to shade. But someone needs to support it during that transition. Jake, now soaked from head to toe and carrying the supplies, took a deep breath. Okay, I'm going in. Time me. I want to know how long I can stay out there. Oh, Jake, please be careful, his mother pleaded. I will, Mom, but look at that little guy out there. If he can do it, so can I. With that, Jake stepped off the sidewalk and onto the superheated asphalt. The change in his demeanor was immediate. His casual confidence was replaced by intense focus as the heat hit him like a physical wall. But he pressed forward, moving as quickly as he could while carrying the supplies. Tommy saw him coming and clapped his hands together. Man coming! Man help doggy! The German Shepherd also seemed to recognize the approaching assistance. Its tail, which had been motionless, gave a weak but discernible wag. Jake covered the distance in what felt like an eternity, but was actually less than 30 seconds. By the time he reached Tommy and the dog, sweat was pouring from his body, and his breathing was labored. But he immediately began his mission, spraying both Tommy and the German Shepherd with the cold water while positioning the wet towels around the animal. Hey there, buddy, he said to Tommy, his voice strained but gentle. You're doing a great job helping this dog. Tommy beamed up at him. Doggy hurt. Tommy help. That's right, and now I'm here to help too. The cold water seemed to revive both the child and the animal. The German Shepherd lifted its head higher and made its most determined effort yet to stand. With Jake supporting one side and Tommy providing encouragement, the dog managed to get its hind legs under its body. It's working, shouted Sarah from the porch. The dog is standing. But just as success seemed within reach, Jake's face went pale and he swayed slightly. The extreme heat was taking its toll, and his time in the danger zone was running out. Jake, called his mother, you need to get out of there now. The young man looked at Tommy, then at the dog, which was now almost fully upright but still unsteady. He had to make a critical decision: retreat to safety or risk heat exhaustion to complete the rescue. Jake's moment of crisis was interrupted by the sound of a large vehicle rumbling down Maple Street. Everyone turned to see a Phoenix Parks and Recreation water truck approaching, its massive tank gleaming in the brutal sunlight. The driver, apparently noticing the unusual gathering of people, slowed down and pulled over to the curb. What's going on here? Wu called out the driver as he stepped down from the cab. His name tag read Carlos, and he appeared to be in his 40s, with the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors year-round. Frank Henderson quickly explained the situation, his words tumbling out with urgency. There's a German Shepherd trapped on the asphalt, and we have a toddler and a young man out there trying to help. The heat is overwhelming everyone. Carlos took one look at the scene and immediately understood the gravity of the situation. I was supposed to be watering trees in Steel Indian School Park, but this takes priority. He gestured toward his truck. I've got 3,000 gallons of water and a pressure system designed for emergency cooling. Can you help them? Sarah called out from her porch, her voice tight with worry for both Tommy and Jake. Absolutely, but I need everyone to clear the area around the street. This is going to create a lot of steam initially, and then it should provide significant cooling. Jake, still struggling with the heat but determined to complete the rescue, looked up gratefully as Carlos positioned his truck. How long do I need to hold on? Just another minute, son. I'm going to create a cooling zone around you, the boy, and the dog. But when I start spraying, you need to shield the child from the initial pressure blast. Tommy, who had been watching these developments with the interested curiosity of a toddler, clapped his hands together as he saw the water truck. Big truck, water truck. The German Shepherd, despite its exhaustion, seemed to sense that relief was coming. With Jake's support and Tommy's continued encouragement, the dog managed to achieve a fully standing position for the first time since the ordeal began. Everyone ready? Carlos called out, positioning the truck's spray nozzle. Wait! Came a shout from down the street. Dr. Walsh was jogging toward them, carrying what appeared to be a large veterinary kit. I'm Dr. Jennifer Walsh, veterinarian. Let me get into position to help with the dog as soon as you cool down the area. Dr. Walsh, be careful, Sarah warned. The heat is incredible. I've dealt with similar situations before, Dr. Walsh replied, though her face showed the strain as she approached the edge of the cooling zone Carlos was preparing to create. Carlos began with a fine mist spray that immediately created a cloud of steam as the water hit the superheated asphalt. The temperature dropped noticeably within seconds, and Jake visibly relaxed as the oppressive heat began to subside. That's it, Jake said with relief, maintaining his support of the German Shepherd. I can actually breathe again. Tommy was delighted by the water spray, laughing and trying to catch droplets in his small hands. The dog, feeling the cooling relief, took its first tentative steps in hours. Dr. Walsh approached quickly, her professional assessment beginning immediately. The dog's paws are severely blistered, but the fact that it's standing and moving is very encouraging. We need to get it to shade and begin proper treatment. There's a large shaded area under the Hendersons' carport, Frank offered from across the street. The dog would be safe there, and I can set up water bowls. With the cooling water creating a safe pathway, Jake was able to guide the German Shepherd toward the shaded area while Tommy walked alongside, continuing to provide his unique form of moral support. Doggy better, doggy walk, Tommy announced proudly, as if he had personally solved the entire crisis. As they reached the safety of Frank Henderson's carport, Dr. Walsh began her examination, while other neighbors rushed to provide additional water bowls, towels, and even a makeshift bed made from patio cushions. The dog is dehydrated and suffering from significant heat exhaustion, Dr. Walsh announced. But with proper care, the prognosis is good. The paw injuries will need treatment, but they should heal completely. Sarah finally felt safe enough to leave her porch and join the group in the shaded area. She scooped Tommy into her arms, overwhelmed with relief and pride. Tommy, you were so brave, sweetie. You helped save the doggy. Tommy hugged her tightly, then squirmed to get down so he could continue watching the German Shepherd. Doggy, my friend, he declared with the matter-of-fact certainty that only small children possess. Carlos, who had been monitoring the cooling operation, approached the group. I've never seen anything like what that little boy did out there. In 30 years of working in Phoenix heat, I've never seen someone so young handle those conditions. It was remarkable, agreed Dr. Walsh. Children are typically much more susceptible to heat exhaustion than adults. What Tommy did should have been impossible. Frank Henderson, who had been quietly observing the scene, cleared his throat. "Dr. Walsh, there's something else. This dog doesn't belong to anyone in our immediate neighborhood. Do you think it might be lost?" Dr. Walsh examined the German Shepherd more closely and found a collar partially hidden under its thick fur. "There are tags here, but they're too damaged by the heat to read clearly. We'll need to scan for a microchip at my clinic." "What do we do in the meantime?" asked Maria Rodriguez. "The dog needs immediate medical attention and a cool, safe place. And to recover, I can take it to my clinic, but..." "But what?" Sarah asked. Dr. Walsh looked at Tommy, who was sitting cross-legged beside the German Shepherd, gently petting its fur while humming a tuneless toddler song. "This is going to sound unusual, but the dog seems remarkably calm and responsive when the child is nearby. Typically, animals in this level of distress remain agitated for hours, even after rescue." "Are you saying Tommy has some kind of special connection with animals?" Linda Morrison asked, having joined the group after ensuring Jake was fully recovered. "I'm saying that what I observed today challenges everything I know about animal behavior and stress responses," Dr. Walsh replied carefully. "This dog should be in a state of severe trauma, but instead it's alert, responsive, and remarkably trusting." Tommy looked up at the adults with his bright, innocent eyes. "Doggy tired. Tommy sing song for Doggy." He began humming again, a sweet, wordless melody that seemed to have an immediately calming effect on the German Shepherd. The dog's breathing became more regular, and its eyes remained fixed on Tommy's face with what could only be described as adoration. Jake, who had been recovering in the shade with cold towels draped around his neck, spoke up. "Dr. Walsh, when I was out there with them, it was like Tommy knew exactly what the dog needed. He wasn't just being brave, he was being smart about it." "How do you mean?" "He positioned himself to provide maximum shade for the dog's head. He used his hands to fan the dog's face, and when I arrived with the water, he immediately directed me to spray the dog's paws first before its body. That's exactly what you would do if you understood the treatment priorities." Dr. Walsh looked thoughtful. "That level of intuitive understanding is extraordinary for any age, but for an 18-month-old child, it's like he could sense what the dog was feeling," Sarah added softly. "He kept saying doggy hurt and doggy thirsty before any of us had figured out the specific problems." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another vehicle, a Phoenix animal control truck that had finally reached their neighborhood after responding to multiple heat-related emergencies across the city. Officer Rebecca Martinez stepped out of the truck, looking harried but professional. "I apologize for the delay. We've had dozens of calls about animals in distress today. I understand you have a situation resolved." Frank Henderson quickly brought Officer Martinez up to speed on everything that had transpired, from Tommy's incredible rescue effort to the community's mobilization to help. "This is definitely one of the more unusual rescue stories I've heard," Officer Martinez admitted. "And you said the dog doesn't belong to anyone in the immediate area?" "That's correct," Dr. Walsh confirmed, "but there's something else you should know. Based on the dog's condition and behavior, I suspect it may have been missing for several days before today's incident." Officer Martinez knelt down to examine the German Shepherd, who remained calm despite the presence of yet another stranger. "The coat condition suggests it's been outdoors for an extended period. This could be a missing pet case rather than just a heat emergency." Tommy, who had been listening to the adult conversation with the patient attention that toddlers sometimes displayed, suddenly looked up at Officer Martinez with bright eyes. "Doggy lost, doggy scared, now doggy safe." The simple wisdom of his words seemed to capture exactly what everyone had been thinking but hadn't quite been able to express. Dr. Walsh carefully loaded the German Shepherd into her mobile veterinary unit, while Tommy supervised from Sarah's arms, offering a steady stream of reassuring baby talk to his new friend. The dog's eyes never left Tommy's face, even as the medical equipment was positioned around it. "I'll need to take him to my clinic for a complete examination and treatment," Dr. Walsh explained to the gathered neighbors. "But I have to ask, would it be possible for Tommy to visit during the recovery period? I've never seen such a profound calming effect between a child and a trauma patient." "Of course," Sarah replied, though she looked puzzled. "Dr. Walsh, is this connection really that unusual? In 30 years of veterinary practice, I've never witnessed anything quite like it. Some people do have a natural affinity with animals, but this goes beyond that. It's almost like..." "Like what?" Frank Henderson prompted. "Like they're communicating on a level we don't understand." Officer Martinez, who had been taking notes on her tablet, looked up with interest. "Dr. Walsh, while you're examining the dog, could you also check for any identifying marks or unusual characteristics? I want to cross-reference this with our missing pet database." "Absolutely. I'll also scan for a microchip and take detailed photos of any distinguishing features." As Dr. Walsh prepared to leave with the German Shepherd, Tommy became agitated for the first time all day. "No! Doggy, stay! Tommy, stay with Doggy!" The dog, hearing Tommy's distress, began to whine softly and tried to move toward the sound of the child's voice. "It's okay, sweetie," Sarah soothed. "The doggy needs to go to the doctor to get better. We'll see him again soon." Dr. Walsh paused, observing the interaction. "You know what? My clinic isn't far from here, and I have a comfortable family consultation room. If you'd like to bring Tommy with me, he could stay with the dog during the initial treatment. It might actually be beneficial for the patient." "Would that be safe?" Sarah asked. "Completely. And frankly, I'm curious to see if Tommy's presence continues to have this calming effect in a clinical setting." 20 minutes later, Sarah found herself in Dr. Walsh's state-of-the-art veterinary clinic, watching in amazement as Tommy sat beside the examination table, quietly humming, while Dr. Walsh worked on treating the German Shepherd's injured paws. "His vital signs are remarkably stable," Dr. Walsh noted, glancing at the monitors. "Normally, a dog this traumatized would be showing elevated heart rate, rapid breathing, and high stress indicators. Instead, his readings are almost normal." Tommy had somehow climbed onto a nearby chair and was now at eye level with the dog's head, maintaining a constant stream of gentle chatter. "Doctor, make doggy better. No hurt anymore. Tommy here." Dr. Walsh paused in her examination. "Sarah, has Tommy always shown this kind of connection with animals?" "Now that you mention it, yes. Even as a baby, he was never afraid of any animal. We encountered dogs, cats, even the neighbor's goat. They all seemed drawn to him. Have you ever considered that he might have some kind of gift?" Before Sarah could answer, Dr. Walsh's computer chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed to one of surprise. "Well, this is interesting. Officer Martinez just sent me information about a missing German Shepherd that matches our patient's description. The owners have been searching for 3 days." "Really? What happened?" "According to the report, the dog's name is Rex, and he belongs to the Davidson family. He escaped from their backyard in the Ahwatukee neighborhood during a thunderstorm last weekend. They've been posting flyers and checking animal shelters throughout the valley." Tommy looked up at the mention of the name. "Rex! Rex, doggy!" The German Shepherd's ears perked up immediately at hearing his name, and his tail began to wag for the first time since arriving at the clinic. "That's definitely our boy," Dr. Walsh confirmed. Officer Martinez is contacting the family now. As if on cue, Dr. Walsh's phone rang. It was Officer Martinez with an update. Dr. Walsh, I've spoken with the Davidson family. They're on their way to your clinic right now, but there's something interesting about this case. What's that? The family has a 2-year-old daughter named Emma who has been inconsolable since Rex disappeared. They said she's been insisting that Rex is with a friend and refusing to believe that he's lost. Dr. Walsh looked at Tommy, who was now gently stroking Rex's fur while the dog gazed at him with obvious contentment. Officer Martinez, I think we may have found Rex's friend. 30 minutes later, the clinic's front door opened to admit a frantic-looking couple in their early 30s, followed by a little girl with curly blonde hair who immediately ran toward the examination room. Rex! Rex! Emma Davidson called out, her voice filled with joy and relief. But when she reached the doorway and saw Tommy sitting beside Rex, she stopped short. For a moment, the two toddlers regarded each other, with the serious consideration that small children bring to unexpected encounters. Then Emma smiled and pointed at Tommy. Rex's friend, Tommy grinned back. Emma, Rex told Tommy about Emma. Sarah and the Davidson parents exchanged startled glances. Neither child had been told the other's name. Dr. Walsh, who had been observing this interaction with professional fascination, spoke quietly to the adults. I know this might sound unusual, but I'd like to suggest something. Rex has been through significant trauma, and his recovery might be enhanced if he could have continued contact with Tommy during the healing process. Michael Davidson, Rex's owner, looked confused. I don't understand. What kind of contact? Therapy visits. Some animals respond remarkably well to consistent interaction with specific people during recovery. In Rex's case, Tommy seems to have an extraordinary calming influence. But they're both so young, worried Lisa Davidson, Emma's mother. That might actually be an advantage, Dr. Walsh explained. Children often communicate with animals in ways that adults can't replicate. And in this case, both children seem to have formed an immediate bond with Rex. Emma had approached Tommy and was now sitting beside him, both children gently petting Rex while engaging in the kind of nonsensical but apparently meaningful conversation that toddlers often shared. Rex was scared, Emma told Tommy seriously. Big loud noise. Rex ran and ran. Tommy found Rex. Tommy helped Rex. Rex not scared now. Rex missed Emma. Emma missed Rex. Michael and Lisa Davidson watched this exchange with wonder. Emma hasn't spoken this much since Rex disappeared, Lisa whispered to Sarah. We were starting to worry that she was becoming depressed. Dr. Walsh completed her examination and began discussing Rex's treatment plan with his family. The paw injuries will require daily cleaning and bandage changes for about 2 weeks. He's also going to need some time to regain his full strength after the heat exhaustion. What about behavioral effects? Michael asked. Will he be afraid of being outside now? That's where Tommy and Emma might be particularly helpful, Dr. Walsh suggested. Animals often overcome trauma more quickly when they have positive associations to replace negative memories. If Rex associates his rescue with these children, it could significantly aid his psychological recovery. Sarah found herself agreeing to a schedule of visits that seemed to benefit everyone involved. Tommy would get to continue his mysterious connection with Rex. Emma would have her beloved pet back while also gaining a new friend. And Rex would have the support of both children during his healing process. As they prepared to leave the clinic, with Rex being carried to the Davidsons' car in a comfortable travel crate, Tommy called out one final message to his new friend. Bye-bye, Rex. Tommy, see Rex tomorrow. No scared anymore. Rex responded with a gentle woof, his first vocalization since the rescue. Dr. Walsh pulled Sarah aside as they prepared to leave. Sarah, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but Tommy appears to have a very special gift. You might want to consider fostering that connection with animals as he grows up. What do you mean? There are therapy programs that use the human-animal bond to help both people and animals heal. Tommy could have a remarkable future in that field if his abilities continue to develop. As they drove home, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary day. Her 18-month-old son had not only saved a dog's life, but had somehow facilitated healing and connection in ways that seemed to defy explanation. Tommy, secure in his car seat, was already asking about tomorrow's visit. See Rex? See Emma? Play with Rex? Yes, sweetie, we'll see Rex and Emma tomorrow. Rex happy now, Emma happy now, Tommy happy now. Sarah smiled, realizing that sometimes the most profound truths came from the simplest voices. 2 weeks had passed since the rescue, and what began as a simple arrangement for Rex's recovery had blossomed into something much more meaningful. The Davidson and Mitchell families had developed a routine that seemed to benefit everyone involved. Daily visits that rotated between both homes, always with Rex at the center of activities that somehow managed to be both therapeutic and joyful. Dr. Walsh had been documenting Rex's recovery with the thoroughness of someone conducting important research. Each visit revealed new aspects of the remarkable bond between the German Shepherd and the two toddlers who had become his constant companions. His physical healing is progressing faster than I've ever seen in similar cases, Dr. Walsh explained to both families during one of their weekly checkups. But more importantly, he's showing no signs of the anxiety or trauma-related behaviors I would normally expect after such a severe ordeal. Sarah and Lisa Davidson had become close friends through their children's shared connection with Rex. They often marveled at how Tommy and Emma seemed to communicate with each other and with Rex in ways that transcended normal toddler behavior. "Watch this," Lisa said to Sarah as they observed the children playing in the Davidsons' backyard. "Emma, ask Tommy what Rex is thinking about right now." Emma looked seriously at Tommy, who was sitting cross-legged beside Rex under the shade of a Palo Verde tree. "Tommy, what Rex thinking?" Tommy tilted his head, as if listening to something only he could hear, then nodded gravely. "Rex thinking about water. Rex wants swim in pool, but Rex scared of big splash." Michael Davidson, who had been cleaning the pool nearby, stopped what he was doing. "That's incredible. Rex used to love swimming, but ever since we got him back, he won't go near the pool. We assumed it was because of the heat trauma." "How could Tommy possibly know that?" Sarah wondered aloud. Emma clapped her hands together. "Tommy talks to Rex. Rex talks to Tommy. I see them." The adults exchanged meaningful glances. What had started as an unusual connection was beginning to reveal itself as something far more extraordinary. Dr. Walsh, who had been making house calls to monitor Rex's progress, arrived just in time to witness an even more remarkable demonstration. Tommy had somehow convinced Rex to approach the edge of the pool, and the two children were sitting on either side of the dog, speaking to him in gentle, encouraging tones. "Rex, water good," Tommy said softly. "Water cool, water fun. No hot water, no scary water." Emma joined in with her own reassurances. "Rex brave, Rex strong. Emma and Tommy here with Rex." To everyone's amazement, Rex slowly extended one paw toward the water, then another. Within minutes, he was standing, chest deep in the shallow end of the pool, his tail wagging as the children cheered his success. "This is remarkable," Dr. Walsh breathed, pulling out her phone to record the scene. "I need to document this for my colleagues. What we're witnessing here challenges conventional understanding of animal therapy and communication. The breakthrough with the pool seemed to unlock something in Rex, Over the following days, he regained his confidence with other activities he had previously enjoyed. He began playing fetch again, exploring the backyard with curiosity rather than fear, and even sleeping peacefully through thunderstorms that previously would have sent him into hiding. But it was during one of Tommy's visits that the most significant revelation occurred. Sarah had arrived at the Davidson house to find an unexpected scene. Tommy was sitting in the middle of the living room, surrounded not just by Rex, but by 3 other neighborhood dogs who had somehow found their way into the backyard. "How did all these dogs get here?" Sarah asked, somewhat alarmed. "That's what we're trying to figure out," Michael replied, looking equally puzzled. "They just showed up about an hour ago. The gate was closed, and we have no idea how they got in." Lisa was watching the scene with fascination rather than concern. "But look at them, Sarah. They're all completely calm and focused on Tommy." Indeed, the dogs, a golden retriever, a small terrier mix, and an elderly beagle, were sitting in a perfect circle around Tommy, who was speaking to them in his characteristic gentle manner. Rex lay beside him, apparently serving as some kind of ambassador or translator. "Doggies sad," Tommy announced to the adults. "Doggies lost. Doggies want families." Emma, who had been watching from her mother's lap, suddenly became excited. That one, she pointed at the golden retriever. "That's Sunny. Mrs. Chen lost Sunny." Michael's eyes widened. "You're right. I saw the missing dog flyers posted around the neighborhood. That does look like the Chen family's dog." Dr. Walsh, who had arrived for Rex's scheduled checkup, found herself documenting yet another unprecedented situation. "This is becoming a pattern. Tommy seems to be attracting animals in distress." "But how would he know they were lost?" Sarah asked. "Maybe he doesn't know," Lisa suggested thoughtfully. "Maybe he just recognizes that they need help, the same way he recognized that Rex needed help." Over the next hour, they were able to reunite all 3 visiting dogs with their worried families. Mrs. Chen arrived in tears of joy to reclaim Sunny, who had been missing for 2 days. The terrier mix belonged to a family 6 blocks away, who had been frantically searching since their pet had escaped during a delivery. The elderly beagle turned out to belong to Mr. Patterson, a widower from the next subdivision who had been devastated by his companion's disappearance. "I don't understand how they all ended up here," Mrs. Chen said as she hugged Sunny gratefully. "It's like something called them to this place." Dr. Walsh was taking detailed notes and photos. "Sarah, I think it's time we had a serious conversation about Tommy's abilities. What we're observing here goes beyond normal animal affinity." That evening, after the excitement had died down and Tommy was napping peacefully with Rex curled up beside his bed, Sarah and Dr. Walsh sat in the Davidsons' kitchen discussing the implications of what they had witnessed. "There are documented cases throughout history of people with extraordinary connections to animals," Dr. Walsh explained. "Some indigenous cultures have traditions about individuals who can communicate with animals in ways that seem supernatural to the rest of us." "Are you saying Tommy has some kind of psychic ability?" "I'm saying that Tommy appears to have a form of intuitive communication with animals that goes beyond normal sensory interaction. Whether you want to call that psychic, spiritual, or simply a highly developed form of empathy is up to you." Michael Davidson, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "The important question is, what do we do with this information? How do we help Tommy develop this gift responsibly?" "That's exactly what I've been thinking about," Dr. Walsh replied. "There are programs that train people to work with animals in therapeutic settings. Animal-assisted therapy is a growing field, and someone with Tommy's apparent abilities could make an enormous difference in the lives of both animals and people. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and concern, but he's so young, and this is all so new to us. Of course, but we don't need to make any immediate decisions. Right now, the most important thing is to support these positive interactions and document what we observe. As Tommy grows, we can explore options for nurturing his gifts. Emma, who had been playing quietly with her toys, suddenly looked up at the adults. Tommy helps doggies. Doggies help Tommy. Rex helps everyone. From the bedroom where Tommy was napping, they could hear him talking softly in his sleep. Good doggies, safe doggies, happy doggies. Dr. Walsh smiled. I think Emma just summed up the most important aspect of all this. It's not just about Tommy helping animals. It's about the mutual healing and connection that happens when beings understand and care for each other. Doradi, as the evening wound down and Sarah prepared to take Tommy home, Rex performed his new bedtime ritual. He gently approached Tommy, who was still drowsy from his nap, and placed his large head against the toddler's small chest. Tommy wrapped his arms around Rex's neck in a sleepy hug. Bye-bye, Rex. See you tomorrow. Sweet dreams, doggy friend. Rex's tail wagged softly as he watched Tommy being carried to the car. In the space of 2 weeks, this remarkable child had not only saved his life, but had helped him rediscover joy, trust, and purpose. The neighbors who had witnessed the original rescue had continued to check on Rex's progress, and many had commented on the positive changes they observed, not just in the dog, but in the entire community. The shared experience of helping during the crisis had brought people together in ways that continued to strengthen their neighborhood bonds. As Sarah tucked Tommy into his own bed that night, she reflected on how profoundly their lives had changed since that scorching Tuesday morning. Her son had revealed abilities that challenged everything she thought she knew about communication and healing, but more importantly, he had demonstrated the power of compassion and courage in the face of suffering. 6 months had passed since that life-changing day in the Phoenix heat, and Tommy's rescue of Rex had grown into something extraordinary. What started as a neighborhood crisis had evolved into a community movement, attracting attention from animal welfare organizations across Arizona. Dr. Walsh had presented her documentation of Tommy's abilities at a veterinary conference, sparking interest from researchers studying human-animal bonds. Tommy, now 2 years old, had become a regular volunteer at her clinic, where his presence calmed nervous animals during difficult procedures. Tommy helped scared doggies feel better, he explained to visitors. Doggies tell Tommy when they hurt. Tommy tell doctor what doggies need. The community had established Tommy's Pack, a network of neighbors who contacted the Mitchell family whenever they encountered lost animals. Tommy's success rate at helping locate missing pets had reached nearly 100%. Rexy had become a therapy dog himself, accompanying Tommy on rescue missions. Emma Davidson had also developed her own connection with animals, showing an uncanny ability to predict their behavior and needs. Frank Henderson reflected on the transformation. Before that day with Rex, people on this street barely knew each other's names. Now we have monthly barbecues, a community garden, and support networks for emergencies. Jake Morrison had changed his major to veterinary medicine after the experience. Carlos, the water truck driver, now headed a rapid response team for animal heat emergencies. Dr. Walsh had expanded her practice to include an animal therapy program with Tommy and Emma as volunteers. On the 6-month anniversary, the neighborhood organized a celebration that became a community-wide event. Tommy spent most of it sitting with Rex under their favorite tree, greeting visiting families and their pets. Tommy, asked a young girl, how do you talk to dogs? Tommy considered the question seriously. Tommy doesn't talk with words to doggies. Tommy talks with heart. Doggies talk with heart too. Everyone can do it if they listen with heart. As the celebration ended, Sarah reflected on the journey that began with her terrified dash to save her son. That day, she had focused only on protecting Tommy from danger, never imagining she was witnessing the beginning of his life's purpose. "Mama," Tommy said as they walked Rex home, "tomorrow Tommy help more doggies?" "Yes, sweetie, tomorrow we'll help. More doggies." "Good," Tommy replied with satisfaction. "Doggies need friends. Everyone needs friends." Dr. Walsh closed her notebook, reflecting on how a medical emergency had evolved into something that challenged understanding of communication and healing between species. As the sun set over Phoenix, Tommy settled into his bedtime routine. He hugged Rex goodnight, whispered sweet dreams to Emma, and curled up in his bed with the satisfied exhaustion of a child who had spent the day doing exactly what he was meant to do. The story that began on a scorching Tuesday morning had become a testament to the power of compassion and the extraordinary things that happen when people choose to care for one another. Dear friends, we hope Tommy and Rex's incredible story has touched your hearts as much as it touched ours. This remarkable tale of courage, compassion, and the mysterious bonds between humans and animals reminds us that sometimes the most profound acts of heroism come from the purest intentions. If this story moved you, we've prepared a special collection of equally heartwarming stories that explore the extraordinary connections between people and the animals they love. You can find this exclusive playlist by clicking the link to your left. If you enjoyed Tommy's journey, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that celebrate the complexity and beauty of life, love, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all. We can't wait to hear your thoughts about Tommy's amazing gift in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a special connection with an animal? Share your story with our community.